All right, I'm here at PorcFest with Matt Kibbe. Matt, how are you doing?
Hey, doing
we shook hands off camera earlier, just so you guys know. This wasn't the first time, but it's a little weird. You're holding the microphone, but I'm interviewing you. I've got a lavalier. How are things? How you been?
Because there's no rules.
There's no rules.
We're just going to see
this
what
is
happens.
Complete anarchy. This is what happens when you unleash us on the world.
Total anarchy.
Guests hold microphones is a whole weird thing.
Yeah.
But what brings you to PorcFest?
So this is my second time, and I'm going to finally commit to come here more because I think we're at this moment. Everyone says the libertarian moment is over. I'm like, no, it's a process, and I think we're stronger in pretty much every category. One of which is sort of education and culture, but this is an actual experiment in community building, and I want to see what happens, and I want to see if there's ways that we could all sort of magnify public awareness about what these guys are doing and how it is that all these guys, many of whom are well-armed hippies, get along. Nobody gets hurt, nobody's stuff gets taken. There's something magical about that.
There's a lot of fun toys being worn around here, yes.
Yeah.
What do you think overall about just the mission of the Free State Project, who puts on this event? Just the idea of libertarians or like-minded people sort of moving to a certain locale and trying to change things in the local way, and hopefully setting an example for others to do similar things across the world, whether it's seasetting, which you just had a panel on recently, or that kind of thing. What do you think about that strategy overall for liberty?
Well, I think it's a good strategy in the sense that I want to see if it works or not. I mean, I'm a former community organizer, and I will tell you that asking someone to travel across the country for a protest is a huge ask. Asking someone to pick up their family and move to New Hampshire is a massive ask.
Right.
So you're not going to get sort of that it's a special sort of person that decides to do that, but there's a tipping point. Maybe like think about Haight-Ashbury in 1966, 67, where it suddenly became the one place where everyone had to be.
And you were there then, right?
Yeah, well, I was totally there, yeah. And I was 3 then. But you know, and that we were talking about this last night. It would be a cool problem to have if too many people showed up at PorcFest, because it would create logistical problems and culture problems. But freedom, of course, is the way that you solve those problems. And I'm hoping that this thing works, but I don't think we should put all our eggs in one basket. We should try podcasts. We should try politics. God help us. We should try all sorts of things that might be the thing that creates sort of a liberty surge.
Yeah, that was one of the discussions we had earlier. It was about liberty and populism, and sort of how libertarians should respond to populism, because obviously, you know, populism gets people riled up, but it's not necessarily based in a certain ethic or what have you.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Just the idea of sort of how we can respond to populism waves that are going to occur regardless of whether we want them to or not.
Yeah.
How can libertarians best respond to the ideas being put out there by someone like, say, Trump, who's able to rile people up, even though his answers aren't correct? He might be addressing a lot of problems that people sort of feel in tune with.
Yeah. Well, I have a more benign opinion about populism, because to me it's an empty vessel and it just means to be popular. And I think we want the ideas of liberty and the values that we all espouse to have a broader audience. So I would consider myself a libertarian populist. And to take it even a step further, when we were doing stuff for Rand Paul for president in Iowa in 2016, and Thomas Massey has said this, we discovered that the Ron Paul movement was half Rage Against the Machine, he doesn't say it this way, but I will, and half liberty.
Right.
And, Massey said they just wanted the craziest son of a bitch in the room. Mm-hmm. But, our narrative is half Rage Against the Machine. We can talk all day about how government screws things up and screws people and enriches the corporate class and all these narratives we have. But we don't talk as much about the beautiful stuff that happens when people are free. So I think our magic is sort of the combination of those two things. But those should be populist stories. Like we need to think about it in terms of how people are hearing what we're saying, as opposed to just saying that anything is populist is bad news.
Pivoting back to the event that we're here at today at PorcFest, I know it's a little bit early in our time here, but what's your favorite part about PorcFest so far? What's your favorite aspect of this whole event?
I like, well, first of all, the beer.
Of course.
And
especially if you got a VIP wristband, then
yeah. And I of course
unlimited.
stopped at a couple of my favorite breweries on the way driving in, because this happens to be in a place where some of the best beers in the world are made.
Thanks to the laws that are, some would say, are connected to the work of the Free State Project.
Yeah, beer freedom is perhaps a more important measure than GDP or.
Is there a beer freedom index that is published anywhere?
We've tried to work on one, and it's you have to abuse science a little bit to get to it. But I measure the real freedom of a state based on if I go in a grocery store and there's like 100 different selections of triple IPAs, I'm feeling the freedom. So the beer, the community, and the idea that they mix substantial discussions about ideas with just hanging around the fire pit, hanging out, and enjoying the fact that we're not alone. Like this is a safe space for libertarians. We can actually say what we believe here.
I think things like, beers and that sort of thing are just a good way to connect to normal people. That's kind of a part of what we try to do with our podcast, is connect to regular people that might not get necessarily all the way into the weeds with a lot of the nerdy libertarian stuff. But having a beer with someone is the kind of thing you can connect to everybody on.
Right.
And maybe that leads to a political conversation about why in this state they're allowed to make IPAs freer or something to that effect.
There is obviously every young craft brewer, in the context of Ludwig von Mises, it's an entrepreneur is someone who wants to do something crazy and beautiful that maybe no one else believes in. That's what entrepreneurship, and so you have all these young micro and nano brewers that start brewing this beautiful beer that they really want their neighbors to dig. And the first thing that happens is they run into barriers to entry. Turns out that big beer and local government have gotten together and said, you can't sell that beer to your neighbor. You can't distribute that beer unless you go through a middleman. So it's a great teacher about crony capitalism and why we should be skeptical of government regulations that are supposedly supposed to help people.
It seems like a lot of people, the non-political people in our lives, only start to listen to libertarian ideas, I think, when they actually run into the problems with the state in their real lives. Maybe when they're in college and they're just in academia, they think, oh, well, these theories sound great. And then suddenly, well, the tax bill hits, or I try to start a business. And then from there, we can actually kind of open that conversation a little bit and say, well, remember that stuff I was talking about? That was kind of weird on the internet a few years ago? Let's have that conversation a little more. What else are you involved with here at PorcFest? Are you on any panels, giving any talks?
So I'll be speaking in about a half an hour with a very innovative title, Don't Hurt People and Don't Take Their Stuff. But it's really about all we're talking about.
The book by that
published a book, New York Times best-selling book, where I tried to take all these ideas that I loved as a kid and translate them into stories in plain English. And I think we're at this moment, certainly in American culture, but I would say global culture, where our challenge is our audience is too big. And we got to change our medium and our storytelling and even the words we use to reach a broader audience who aren't going to consume the kind of arguments that we use because they don't really process things as economics. They think about personal stories, they think about emotional stories, they think about values-based stories. So I'm going to be talking about that because I'm more optimistic than ever. I think this is our opportunity to reach a much broader audience, but we need a different set of tools to do it.
All right, well, Matt, it's been a blast talking to you.
Yeah.
See you around PorcFest. See you in the VIP tent at the bar, I'm sure.
We'll get beers.
All right, good times.